Hi again. Well, we're in another period of market volatility. People are nervous, some people are panicking, they're ready to make the wrong decisions and the wrong moves. So I thought I would use this opportunity rather than speak to specifics about where we are in time, remind people of how markets have done over time, and remind yourself, are you an investor or a trader? If you're a day trader, you're going to be making decisions each day and they're going to be pretty active. If you're an investor, which is where most people fit, especially retirees, you're in it for the long haul. I'm going to use a few slides from a recent edition of JP Morgan's Guide to the Markets. So just to clarify, when I'm talking about the markets, it's either going to be typically for stocks, the S&P 500 Standard & Poor's 500 index, which is a list of 500 mostly large companies in the United States. For bonds, that would be the aggregate bond index, which would be a variety of different types of corporate treasuries, a variety of other types of bonds. So again, a broad look at bonds in the U.S. The first slide talks about inflection points, and what I mean by that is periods of time going back to 1997 where things were going well and all of a sudden they turned for different reasons. It could be the dot-com bubble, it could have been the Great Recession when banks were collapsing, it could have been during COVID. We have a variety of instances where at that time it was different. It's always been different. But what happened next? And you can see by this chart that even though we did have stress points over time, the market did pick back up again and move forward. Is that a guarantee for the future? Of course not. But it does give you a little bit of sense of history. Here's one most of you have probably seen, especially if you worked with an advisor at any point in time. This chart again shows the S&P 500 going back to 1980, and what you see on the gray bars is where the market ended that year, up or down. The red dots show during that year what was the low point. So you can see pretty much every year there was a low point below zero. However, there are very few times compared to the positive times where the markets actually ended down. So in the past, the odds have been in your favor. This slide shows how time in the market has benefited people in the past rather than timing the market. The green bars represent the stock market, the blue bars the bond market, and then the gray bars would be a blend, a typical 60-40 portfolios, maybe for a retiree, 60% stocks, 40% bonds. In any one given year going all the way back to 1950, it shows how you could have been down 37% in the stock market or up 52%. So focus on that zero line, the negative line, the negative numbers below that. You can see after 5 years, very few times would an investor have lost money. And the worst case would have been 2% down. After 10 years, 1% for the stock market, they would not have lost money in the bond market or with a balanced portfolio. And over 20 years, there was no rolling 20-year period, meaning at any point in time, picking all of the possible 20-year periods from 1950 where you would have lost money with any one of those three concepts. This slide is one of my favorite. It shows consumer confidence over time based on the University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Survey. The blue dots on this chart show points where people were the most confident or the least confident, and then the numbers alongside of those or near those blue dots show what happened in the market 12 months later. So one of the lowest points, if you look at 1980, people were extremely fearful. 12 months later, the market was up 20%. Again, the market we're talking about, the S&P 500. You look at November of 2008, during the Great Recession, people were extremely fearful. 12 months later, market up 22%. In June of 2022, people again were figuring that, okay, that's actually a very low point. 12 months later, the market was up 17.6%. You can see on the green dot, the only green dot on this chart, we're down there pretty far right now. In March of 2025, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but just looking at history, it would give people, I would think, some kind of confidence to hang in there and not make any rash moves. So while we are currently in a period of volatility, I would ask that you save this video for those future times to remind yourself that, yeah, this time it's different, but probably different like all the other times, and maybe you shouldn't make rash moves if it's not in your best interest.